Welcome to another episode of Salesforce Trails and Trials, where we help you accelerate your career and turn soft skills into hard money by mining gold from project failures, bringing insights from ecosystem experts and inspiration from others on the trail. Now joining us with over 20 years in the ecosystem, please welcome our host, John Klein.
Well, what a pleasure to be back again, gentlemen, and congrats on getting married, Mike and Eric. Pleasure to see you. And this will be another episode of Salesforce Trails and Trials, where you get to listen in to three architects as we discuss what's going on today in the world of Salesforce, in the world of AI, and things that you care about. So, guys, I want to talk about something really interesting to start out. Did you guys hear about the announcement from Switzerland? Came out last week, that they are looking at creating an AI model as a public utility to compete
Wow.
with American closed models and Chinese closed models, where they are going to make all of the weightings publicly visible and all of the training data publicly available. It's trained in over 5,000 languages, and they're
Right.
using
There's not 5,000 languages?
I was wondering how there is that many,
Okay.
but maybe they're including dialects. Who knows? But what
Okay.
I love about this is just that sense. I believe, as we've talked about, that the future of successful AI is diverse and open source in many areas. But I love this essentially a shot across the bow to the normal kind of commercial models.
Yeah.
And curious on your thoughts.
I mean, that's exciting, right? I mean, to have anything open source and more thinking outside the box. I mean, we absolutely need that in a time where we need to be able to have some more control over what these models are being trained on, right? And I feel like there's going to be a lot of businesses that start wanting to steer us in different directions with the closed models
Mm.
that they're going to have certain utilities, but there's going to be certain things I don't feel comfortable with them being used for.
Yep. I've heard pros and cons about Grok this week. Political angles on Grok that are like influenced by not statistics, but by preference. But then I've also heard somebody say, "Oh, I actually really use Grok for coding. I really like it." So like we see both sides of that happening in the real space here, in the competitive, the real space, like the leading space of AI. My thought is around cultural preservation. Switzerland has a main French, German, and Italian as languages, as well as Romansh, which is spoken around the region of Geneva. For global people around me, I'm probably slightly wrong, but there are these dialects around the world that are maybe they're taught in school, but maybe they're mostly verbal. And you know, I'm not sure this is included in Switzerland's model, but I'd probably be surprised if it wasn't. I think it's pretty cool that you could have your language supported by the language model. I'm optimistic. I'm hopeful that's the case, because otherwise the whole world's going to be thinking in English. And as long English is great, but it's not the most beautiful language. It is not the most eloquent language. There are beautiful words in other languages that if you speak the other language, gosh, we don't even have a word for that in English.
Mm-hmm.
That really essential for productivity? No, but it's a shame. And that there is so much value in other languages, and that, I think the language models, like I have a friend who used to be at Salesforce who is now a leader I'm just going to leave it to a European country. She's an innovation leader in that country as an ex-Salesforce salesperson and sales engineer. But her language is not English. And so the language models don't support her language.
Mm.
And so like, I do think, I think there's always innovation that's going to happen in the language models at the tip. OpenAI, NVIDIA, whatever, Meta, whoever is building the language models. But also there's commodity not far behind. And you can have pretty good open source language model
Mm-hmm.
pretty soon after it was innovative a year before. Or, there's not a long lifespan, I'm going out on a limb saying this, between it was bleeding edge and everybody does that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's pretty cool that Switzerland, it is like a utility. You assume it's going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And wouldn't it be great to not be beholden to a monopoly and just have it be provided for the freedom of use of your citizens. It's pretty cool.
And to speak on that sentiment of the English is becoming the new programming language, and I was like, really? Because I feel like there's a lot more opportunity than just English language to
Hmm.
do that.
Tell
And I
me
feel
what
like
you
that's
see. What
also,
do you see? What do you
oh,
mean?
sorry.
No, what do you mean?
Because I've seen this left and right, like if you use English for your prompting language, like you'll get results that are more articulate to that you can use, right? Like it's like results that are more usable. And I feel like that's not democratized AI. That feels kind of closed source.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's fair at all.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, the only reason there's so much, I mean, the Western world, but also the English speaking world is so far forward. There's YouTube channels in French and there's YouTube channels all over the place, but there's probably YouTube channels in parts of the world I don't even know about. But there's so much English content and there's so many Google books that have been scanned in English. You know, the libraries, the early digitization that happened, it was in English. So like there's definitely a bent, a bias in the whole AI LLM world about what's the training data? Well, I don't know.
and
English.
Hmm.
and it kind of made me think when I heard that the first time of like, why certain companies make Apple products because they think, oh, there's more people that'll spend money with that OS. And is it
Mhm.
like, is that the same thing with English? Like they think more people will spend money on English content? I don't know. I'd like to find out like what's the driver behind this.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's certainly on my side. I think that I love it as as just an additional competitor in the marketplace to
Mhm.
rebalance
Mhm.
and provide alternatives. And I've also found, right, there are stand-up open source models now. Like there's one for coding, for example, that specializes in Salesforce languages and about 50 others that you can stand up on your own rentable infrastructure.
Hmm.
And so that's really why I was asking you guys questions earlier, because Salesforce on the bring your own model tends to still focus on, models that are built on Amazon and on kind of other existing infrastructures. And I was thinking like, well, I think there's a niche here to stand up models and data graphs for businesses that don't want to share, and they may not even want to set up kind of assistant like libraries. They want to host it themselves, and they have the hardware. And so I'm gonna do some exploration into that a little bit, and I'll report back
Yeah.
on how it goes.
You asked the question in our little Slack channel on the side this week, like, hey, can you use open source LLMs? You called them FOSS. Had to look up that acronym, free and open source LLMs. Um, and as far as I know, as long as you have your LLM API supports one of the standard formats that's in our documentation, which is
Hmm.
JSON or CSV or whatever, I think you can just connect any model hosted anywhere to Salesforce as long as there's standard authentication. And that's where I left it. I haven't heard back more on have you found anything, or is that where you're going to experiment?
That's what I'm gonna experiment with because I found one additional. So just below the help doc that you sent me,
Yeah.
there's one that talks about kind of leveraging your own model, but it's very brief and it only mentions existing, like Amazon's Redshift, like you doing it on Redshift or right, it mentions these specific connectors. And so that's
Yeah.
why I was curious if I were to host it, at whoever's ABC host and or even on-prem, crazy, and make it accessible via the cloud, right, via an agent, whether I could connect that to Salesforce. So it'll be an interesting discovery,
Yeah.
but
Cool.
I'm
Well,
excited to walk through it. So what have you
one
guys?
thing
Go ahead,
Oh,
Mike.
sorry, just one more last comment on that is, for enterprise scale, I've been hearing this a lot from friends or folks in the industry is that like they're finding ways to get around the whole approval process because it's killing them to get like the AI is happening, but trying to get it approved and like into the, system has just been a mess and a nightmare to
You mean
like
within their own
security.
IT governance?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
And sorry, couldn't articulate that well. So they've been finding ways to get around it by, hey, we already have AWS. Oh, look, Bedrock's right there.
Hmm.
And that's their kind of like fast track to just get something happening. And I feel like that's a whole nother piece of this puzzle that we have to figure out. Like we
Hmm.
have to make this easy to implement so that it's not this bureaucratic red tape thing.
It's
I just
Yeah.
interesting.
want
I
to,
mean. Many a Salesforce product, I mean, Cirrus Insight years ago, like that was their strategy. They're like, oh yeah, most profiles have API enabled checkbox on by default, and they're like, we just sell to that. Just type in your credentials, bro, and we are off to the races. You don't need any approvals.
Yes, yes, yes. Back in the day.
So
Wow. All right. So what are other interesting things we've learned lately?
I've been seeing a lot more news around OpenAI's agent mode, right? And that basically rebranded operator, but now
Hmm.
it's just kind of their encompassing way of articulating it. I haven't, had access to it yet. I don't know if either of you have played with it or seen it.
Nope, not
Okay,
me.
I
I was
haven't
just
played with
curious
it,
because
no.
that's the topic that was hot off the press, and
Hmm.
just haven't seen anything more about it.
Yeah, I haven't. I knew they had an API maybe 3, 4 months ago. It was like the beginning of the agent API at OpenAI. I think that's who it was. Or am I confusing with NVIDIA? Did NVIDIA have an agent API? Who knows? Okay, I have some
Yeah,
homework to do.
no worries.
I can't speak to that. I do have the impression that they are there's a there's a lot of perception of people still pursuing the AI company as the company to partner with, meaning Microsoft or NVIDIA or OpenAI or whatever. And from my inside the Salesforce bubble, I think that's a general good path. You're exploring a platform on your iPad, on your SaaS, on your infrastructure as a service that provides capabilities, and you're going to build from scratch and go do that. And it's amazing. And I looked into the parallels between Salesforce Agentforce and AWS Bedrock and uh, Microsoft agents. Besides us, Salesforce being primarily not code, they're pretty similar. They all have either topics or intent or goals. I forget what they title
Hmm.
their things. And under that, we call them actions, or there's strategies, or I can't remember the terminology right now, but there's steps they implement. And I recall hearing from my customer that AWS Bedrock was more deterministic in the order of execution of its actions, which they preferred. Salesforce started out very non-deterministic.
Hmm.
Your topic gets picked, but then our reasoning engine kind of cycles through repeatedly, reviewing all options at every step to figure out what is the next right step, because we're not necessarily going to evaluate these things in order unless the instructions say do this first. And we are seeing reason to look at more determinism
Hmm.
in our agents, because there are agents where you want to be very deterministic. One example was, I'm taking in data from a customer and I need them to answer these 51 questions before we can move on to the next step. Can I do that through a chat interface? Your context window can get so long
Hmm.
that it forgets what question it was on or
Hmm.
which ones have been completed, and it then can go out of order. So there really are use cases where non-determinism is a bad thing
Hmm.
and determinism is necessary. And so I think there's a lot of similarity between all the agent models. One I learned that was surprising was, of course, it's pro Salesforce. Our agents by default have multiple topics. And I've been told that Bedrock and Microsoft Copilot are each single topic agents. And to orchestrate communication or handoff between those topics is configuration construction work on its own, whereas in the Salesforce agents, it's just assumed there's multiple topics per agent. The
Hmm.
downside about adding too many topics per agent is the agent can get slow or burdened by trying to be the omni agent. And so you end up having to split those agents across. Um, but all that to say, like, there's a lot of similarity, which is, I guess, kind of a relief. We're on the right track to defining what is an agent. It's
Hmm.
an agent, it's actions, and then it's, governance and logic and execution control.
Yeah. That's good. Well, let me one call out here for the sake of our
Yeah.
listeners. So when we say deterministic or non-deterministic, essentially what we're defining there is how predictable is the output if you were to run it multiple times. The more
Yeah.
deterministic, the more consistent and predictable the output is. The less deterministic, meaning the more variance or the more different each run will be. And sometimes that's good. Sometimes
Yeah.
non-determinism is great. It's a lot of variety. You want to provide a different voice. I will have,
Me as a public speaker, I am non-deterministic. Every
yes,
time you talk to me, it's going to come out as a
so
work of
it's,
art in a different way.
yes,
But the people who speak on stage at Salesforce are deterministic. They will
yes,
stick to their script and they will make sure they hit their points. And
it's a great point. Great
yeah,
example. Now, I will have a call out while you're talking about topics that if you haven't, if our listeners haven't gone through, at least through the Agent Force training through Innovator, it's really, really helpful because you essentially build several agents, you add topics to agents, and you can see why having too many topics would be essentially a diminishing value
yeah.
versus having fewer topics and then just having you know, um, a separate queue of topics. So that's I learned a bit there, which is great. Another thing I'll call out since we're talking about you know, I don't want AI to commandeer the entire conversation
It's just
because
taking
there's
over our lives
lots,
in general.
yeah, there's lots of amazing things that are not AI. And so I want to call out some really long standing for people who have been in the Salesforce world, 24 years and just near there like us. I think actually what was done in the security summary is so incredibly helpful.
What do
And
you mean?
so for those who, if you do your, we have some updates for those who have certifications around either architect, admin, or platform app builder. You'll walk through where now when you go to a permission set group or a profile, you'll now get this great summary that you can quickly drill
Oh,
down into, hey, why isn't my user able to see this? It used to be a lot of comparison shopping with someone else's profile that can see it. Now they've really done a good job of summarizing what this person has access to. It looks a little bit like the, lightning page activation screen a bit. And I just thought call out a really good call out to the UX team of trying to make all of that, especially now that we have profiles and lots of permission set groups and permission sets beneath that. It's really making one of the most tedious tasks and time consuming tasks of an admin much, much simpler, which is
awesome.
really great.
So, and just to build on that, when it was in beta, it was a game changer for me at an ISV because I could then show the TAMs how to click that button when they were on a customer call
Mm-hmm.
and completely get me out of the conversation and just let them have that right there with the customer right there
Mm-hmm.
without me. So
Yes.
huge.
Yes. So very,
Cool.
very good. So
Love
be
the
sure
shout
to
out. You
take your
mentioned
update. Yep. Keep
you
going.
mentioned Innovator. So Agent Blazer Innovator, there's a series of badges. Two have been released. One's supposed to be released next week. It's called Legend.
Mm-hmm.
And so I too, as an internal Salesforce employee, we're like gold motivated, you know, told to go get your Agent Blazer champion first by the end of this quarter, Agent Blazer Innovator if you're awesome. And then Legend is coming next week, and you can't do Legend unless you've done Innovator. And I tell people, both non-technical and technical, go do the Innovator because there's great framework resources and center of excellence resources and how do we develop our AI strategy in those badges that are business topics, as well as some hands-on experience so you can get, going on it. And we're not going to ask you to build custom flows. You basically just use the flows out of the box. You copy paste some text for description and scope and instructions into the agent, and it's working. The next one, Legend, you may actually have to get dirty with your flows and some Apex and things like that. But it really gets your hands dirty, and I'm glad you found value in it. I think it's been great for me too. I came away going like, oh my God, I have configured now Agentforce Sales Coach, Agentforce SDR, Agentforce Service Cloud, and then there's a separate Agentforce for employees. You can go do all those things, and now you know the full scope of what comes out of the box for
Mm-hmm.
agents. And the next step that we're going through internally is we're doing workshops with our SEs to advance their knowledge from theoretical to applied. How do we if a customer comes to me with a problem or an agent that's not working, how do I jump in and solve it? So we actually created a bunch of broken agents and we're giving them blind, without instructions, without too much context. Hey, this agent is slow. Can you fix it? And The first time they do it, they're like, gosh, what is the problem? Oh my gosh, look how many instructions they have. Oh my gosh, look at these instructions. They say if then, if then, if then. That's not the place for
They're
instructions.
like, what's prompt conflict?
What is going on? And so, and then the solution for one of these is you got to go design your own flow and take all these deterministic reasons or steps that are happening in the instructions and put them into a flow. Because to back up to determinism, determinism belongs in a flow.
Hmm.
Non-determinism stuff happens with agents. So that's the next step of our learning is give me a piece of junk and let me diagnose it and figure out the problem is and uncover those things so that we're just so that we're comfortable coming into customers and the real world slaps us in the face. We're like, yeah, I've seen that. Let's just dig into it. Let's find out what it is. And I'm excited about us doing that kind of real world training.
Interesting. And it's especially interesting to hear you mention flows. Like, there's a lot of things I like about flows, but in a time of like tools like Cursor,
Yeah.
it's hard for me to justify configuring an entire flow by hand versus popping in Cursor and just having it generate the whole
Do
automation.
it.
But
Yeah,
I
do it or
saw,
eight flows or Apex. I would just say don't put the logic in
oh,
instruction.
okay, okay, okay.
That's what I'm saying.
But I did see that there is like prompting to flows that they're working on. Not sure where it's at, but I've
Yeah,
played with it in beta. I think it could be a really interesting thing.
I've seen that too. I played with it maybe at TDX or Dreamforce. I can't remember when, hey, create me a flow. I want to take the case object, and if ever this happens, then do this. But if it doesn't happen, then do this. And it will generate the flow for you. I don't know where that is in terms of product being released. The other thing that exists in agents is there are filters at the top of every agent that say when this topic should or shouldn't apply.
Hmm.
And that's another
Instructions.
way to put some logic into
Hmm.
never use this topic for a customer who's premier. Always uses this topic for a prospect, but not a customer. And like
Hmm.
you can put some rules in there that are much more rigid. There's so much talk about AI. I'm sorry I took us back there, John.
All
Oh,
good.
my
Again,
brain
all
just
good.
keeps thinking about it, so I'm the worst at it.
No, it's fine. I think, when I chat with a fair number of architects every, like just during my week, and I went to 6 Dreamin' events this year. I got one more coming up in Florida, and I wasn't able to. I wanted to make Midwest and Mountain High. I'm actually so impressed, right? I mean, for those who are listening, go to a Dreamin' event. These organizers are exceptional people, and you get to spend an extended amount of people with what I consider a bit more higher caliber. People are much more experienced and they've been in the ecosystem longer at a Dreamin' event than the typical people you meet at Dreamforce, which is great. They have a different purpose. And um, and so the general sentiment that people are feeling is that they're like, hey, we know AI is very cool, but like we need to come up for air a little bit. And we need to, there's still a wide horizon of what we're providing here. And so we want to make sure and not neglect all the other things that we need to be doing in Salesforce that aren't going to be impacted by AI. And there's a ton. Like
Yeah.
AI is not going to help with technical debt, right? Except in instances where Metazoa, right, will help you leverage a statement and kind of help you take action on that. But ultimately, the action is largely deterministic, right?
Yeah, I did. Let me share an innovation. One of
Yes.
the SEs came across, but the product manager for event monitoring created this one. Can you have an agent that has access to event monitoring data? And you can say, which of my objects are the most frequently accessed?
Hmm.
Which of my customers, which of my users are doing X, Y, or Z? And about 42 of the 57 event monitoring event types now can be accessible via SOCL and they're in an object. Maybe, I don't know how they do this, only the last 30 days, maybe, or something,
Hmm.
but it suddenly, wouldn't it be great? And I haven't tried this. If you can say, which of my Apex classes is throwing a 50,001 query error
Hmm.
this week. And at least it's something you can just check on once in a while. I mean, there's a dashboard you could get for that if you configure the dashboard, but that takes more time. It
Hmm.
might be
This
faster to just ask the agent.
This will be so huge for ISVs because I can't tell you how many times one of the people that installed the managed package tried to blame the
Hmm.
package and to have an event monitoring agent to say, oh no, this is right here in your code base.
Hmm.
The amount of time that would save.
Yeah.
I think
Well,
some ISPs might pay for their customers to have that.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell
Amazing.
you what, so some good news here is in the I think it was in the spring 25 release.
Hmm.
They now made a couple aspects of event monitoring free
Mhm.
to
I saw
everyone.
that.
Right. And one of them is this use case. Now, the look back period is only 1 day. So the
Okay.
expectation is that you're doing something soon.
Yeah.
But I think it's tremendous that they're exposing some of this data because event monitoring is so valuable, but most people don't want to justify the budget. I think it's 30% of your license cost.
I didn't
Um,
know it comes with Shield, so it's a portion.
okay. Yeah.
It's one of those things. It's a subpart of Shield.
Yeah.
And
So
it's
go on.
Oh, sorry, it's just very complicated to implement because I was almost going to implement it myself and just create
Mm,
integrations and then sell that as a service in past life for ISVs. But it's just so expensive to hook into all that. That's why Change Data Capture and MuleSoft are products, and they want you to, But anyway, it all makes sense. I get it. Like,
hmm Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I'm happy that they're extending some of that because, yeah, diagnosing those Apex emails is not for the faint of heart, right?
Hmm.
So it's neat that we can start to capture it. And I think your use case there, Eric, right? I mean, like research, like AI, research with AI has been something that's been going on for at least 2 decades. And it's a very, very strong use case. And I think it's one that is clearly what I would consider a co-op AI example, right? One that puts a cape onto your role rather than an escape from your role, which is really important.
Hmm.
And so I'm really happy to see the beginnings of, this might just be a test, right? They see what's the demand, how do people make use of it, and so maybe they'll increase the categories. Maybe they'll increase some of the look back periods, right, as they find it valuable, because it's mutually beneficial if people can much more quickly find issues that are
Totally.
not exceptions. Salesforce wins
Totally.
when that happens, right?
Totally. My analogy is, when you're driving a go-kart, you have no dials. You don't know what your oil level is. You don't know what your gas is. You don't know what your mileage is. You don't know how your car is running. And then, you know, things might go wrong and you wouldn't know they were coming. And by turning on event monitoring, you now know have visibility into security issues you didn't know were happening, like who's logging in as who. You have visibility into adoption. So which of on my new LWC that I released, who's my early users?
Hmm.
And then performance, which of my reports are demonstrably slow regularly and used more than once a month. And so those, I would go log a ticket with Salesforce and I would ask for an index to be added. Those are free, by the way. If they will
Hmm.
do make a difference, Salesforce will add an index to your objects and accelerate the performance of your reports. And like that's just an example of like technical debt is a problem that's facing a lot of customers who've been on Salesforce for a while because they've had multiple consultants, multiple leaders, multiple heads of sales, multiple heads of support, and strategies have changed over the years. And you've got layers of paint, sort of, if you will, on your org. And unless you've been diligent about removing what's no longer needed, which is there's not a lot of
But yeah, the
visible
process of
ROI in that.
subtraction is not popular.
It's not popular. There's more risk. You got to make sure nobody's really using it anymore. It's easier just to add than destroy.
Hmm.
You're going to get to a point, Salesforce got to a point where like our main org was too heavy. And
Mm.
so it's a multi-year process for us. We're looking at how are we going to do support quickly? How are we going to scale sales? And what are we going to redo? And so we're going through a lot of tech debt remediation right now to address our org. So it's everybody. It's going to happen to everybody when sooner or later, if you are successful and you grow.
and and to speak on that point, I mean, in past lives, I worked at larger companies. Event monitoring is essential for like enterprise software, right? So like I've
Hmm.
implemented Datadog or Splunk or even open source managed packages like Nebula, right? Like
Yeah.
just anything to give us metrics on key parts of the infrastructure. Because if you can't see it, you're just spending a ton on support resources to, go into the black box.
Yeah. We had a customer, huge customer software company that used to, so they really invested in Visual Force. They needed to build a really custom support screen for their call center. Lightning wasn't a thing for whatever reason. Maybe Salesforce Support Console wasn't a thing. They had a better idea about how to do support. So they built this thing. And then they would get complaints from the business unit saying Salesforce is slow. And they were like, there's nothing on the Trust website that says there's a problem right now, but they were kind of blind. So they implemented their own instrumentation. Before and after every Apex query, they would send a platform event out to a receiver, out to the bus, and the platform event would contain the SQL statement and the before time and the end time, or something like that. Maybe they would have a stop timer after each one. And so that gave them the visibility to have a dashboard where if the business called and said Salesforce was slow, they'd say, it's not our problem, it's a network problem. And
Because they
so,
could quantitatively prove it.
yeah, and they could prove there's no fluctuation in Salesforce
Hmm.
performance. Sometimes maybe Salesforce was the issue. That's not the point. The point is the instrumentation kept stress off of their backs because they could show it wasn't their platform was the problem, and this in some cases, and it was another
Hmm.
part of the chain in delivering the service to the user.
Mm.
And
Well,
automations, that's so common too, especially when you get into Apex query times. That's why when the Evergreen functions came out, I was so excited about that. I was like, wow, we can get out of Salesforce, do a crazy amount of processing and come back.
hmm
Because the exact problems you're talking about. At scale, it's very challenging. And that there's a whole different strategy we could probably go into talking about Salesforce at scale.
hmm
It is still as a tangent. I think John and I talked about it maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago in Trails and Trials, but Salesforce at scale or enterprise Apex, it's not what anybody who's ever programmed Apex knows it to be. It's like there's a whole methodology to abstract the solution so that it's packageable,
hmm
so that it is
Composable. Yeah,
composable, so that
polymorphic whenever
your
possible.
testing is
Yeah.
high performance. You can actually have mock tests that accelerate the performance if you choose to run the mock tests. You won't run the actual unit test. I forget the strategy,
Yeah.
but it is a good topic, Mike, and you and I should nerd out about this
I
sometime.
could talk about this all, especially
Yeah.
at
I
ISV
think
where
it's like,
customers.
keep going.
Oh, I was gonna say, especially being at an ISV where customers tried to prove us for certain situations, and then I start pulling out the cheat sheet showing SOQL timing and like how all of these things matter for like what's indexed and like your query optimization, and like show them our raw queries to like prove like I have the most optimization on our end. Like that stuff that when you get to that level, when you start pulling up the back end of sorry, you can only get it through developer tools. Like when you start going, you enable like the logging, where it shows the actual, yeah, you know exactly what I'm talking about, the
Yeah,
index weights.
yeah,
Like
Hmm.
that's the level I've had to go to sometimes to like prove a
amazing.
point.
Cool. The people who build our ISV apps, both John and Mike, I mean, that is a deep level of Salesforce platform expertise. Like,
Most people don't even know about that side of
yeah,
Salesforce. The whole packages, managed packages, or now, push updates out. I mean,
yeah.
it's fascinating. And I think just one thing to call out, I was looking actually for oh, here we go. It's episode 12, Enterprise Apex Best Practices. So for
Uh-huh.
those who want to go back and binge, go to episode 12. We talk about big picture things, frameworks. We talk about ways to leverage the governor limits API, right, to manage your queues, all kinds of interesting things you have access to that, yeah, most Apex developers probably don't take advantage of.
Yeah.
But I want to highlight, there's a great use case. I did a global real estate company. They're also on some television shows. And they essentially, real estate hasn't historically been a super strong industry area for Salesforce, but they migrated from property base, which is a great ISV product for a certain size real
On
estate firm
AppExchange?
on the AppExchange. Yep.
Okay.
So they migrated from that, and so I helped build them. Essentially, they had some needs outside of that, and they needed the enterprise license so they could build out their own custom objects and such.
Yeah.
One thing that was remarkable about this is there's some compliance needs within real estate where if I partner, for example, with another real estate company and we want to do something together, I have to keep the customers of my business discrete from the customers of their business. So even if I had a Salesforce org that was great, and it's really not a good idea for me to bring all of their context into my org because now I have to create a super private structured security model, which is can be really, really challenging and pedantic. And so you're like, well, what do I do? Because I have this great functionality already, and they're going to spin up a new org. Well, it's great. You can use the private app exchange, which means you can leverage all of this packaging capability, and you can put all of that technology that you've done into an org that essentially becomes kind of your origin, your packaging org. And now you
Mm.
can install that product on demand. You don't have to publish it on the public app exchange. You don't even have to sell it. You can now simply say, look, I want this functionality as part of these new joint venture orgs that I'm spinning
Ah,
up for the sake of, they would do it, for example, for resorts, right? So
yep.
the resort would spin up a new org and they would go through the whole process. It would be like a 3 to 5 year process where they would need to sell out all of the units, et cetera. And then they would just
Yeah,
basically
timeshares.
sunset the org, right? And so we used that private app exchange to create this package, and it was phenomenal because you could still make it managed where you can roll out updates and keep all of them up to date while keeping all of the contacts separate and discrete and having individual kind of contextual customizations on the platform that enhance and extend it based on what Mexico needs, right? Because some of these places are in
Mhm.
Mexico, or what Europe needs because some of these things are in Europe. There's a really good use of Salesforce and very forward thinking because it's been there for probably 15 plus years and still think it has very little cross-pollination across most of the people who work in the Salesforce world. I think there's a lot of use cases for it and it essentially costs you nothing. Salesforce just provides it to you and makes it available.
Totally. Mike, have you come across that packaging
I
within the
haven't
company?
I haven't.
I saw it one time we had a customer that did outsourced renewal sales. So they'll take the low end, no offense to the customers, low value customers, the customers that owe $1,000 to $5,000 annually, like some small deals. All the team edition customers of Salesforce, for example,
Hmm.
which we still sell that. And their commitment to their customer was, hey, give us your customers and we will do the renewal. I mean, it's not a complicated sales cycle, whatever. They had two pieces of IP. One was we know what metrics to track, and the other one was um well, and they would actually build a whole instrumentation around the performance of the renewal team, and what they want to do is spin up a new org for every new client, receive that client's lead database and contact database and whatever with the contract end date and whatever, automate the flow or the process of doing the renewal sales. And then, I don't know, I'm going to make it up, but whatever they got renewed, they probably committed to 80% renewals. And if they got 90%, they got to keep the bonus, keep the
Hmm.
difference. Um, and so I think when I was working with them, they had 100 orgs because they had like 100
Hmm.
clients. So, and they did the packaging thing too. So they would just get a brand new trial, drop in the package that had all their reports and dashboard, that had all their
Hmm.
integrations to backend systems so they could synchronize all the performance of all the orgs back to a central dashboard.
Nice. Yeah.
So,
The heartbeat. I love that. And it's interesting because most people don't think about, a Salesforce instance in the commercial sense of being ephemeral in any way. Like it's only going to
mhm,
be here for a couple of years. Like we think about that now with Scratch orgs. Like for
right,
example, I have a client right now who wants to migrate to nonprofit cloud. And I'm like, okay, I'm familiar with some of it, a little education cloud work.
right.
But I just spun up a scratch org that has everything I want, made it expire in 30 days, and now I can actually do a mock implementation. I can do whatever I want in there, and that's
Mhm,
definitely ephemeral because it's going to go in 30 days.
right.
But it's just interesting to think about. There's a lot of use cases out there where you might have something that's only around for 2 years, and Salesforce is still a great solution because it offers you
Yeah.
a tremendous amount of benefit for that 2 years. And maybe it disappears. Maybe that turns into a product where, like these guys, they serve other people who have those needs and can now spin up that org as a
Mhm,
trial force org. And it
yep.
comes pre-configured, pre-filled with data. There's just a lot of good stuff on that side of the house.
Yeah, the
Well, this,
closest, maybe it's more adjacent to some of this stuff, but like Eric, you mentioned like, all these different packages being installed in orgs, and there's kind of one main org where all that data rolls up into. I mean, from the ISV perspective, things like the feature parameters so once the package is installed in each org, then the ISV has some metrics and data on how the product's being used. There's stuff
Yeah.
like that that I've worked on,
Hmm.
which is useful because then you can make some product decisions and better help educate the customer on their usage or things that are
Hmm.
key metrics that you need to help influence what you're doing next in your product.
Are you there, just as background for everybody, I think it's called a partner license manager, where when you're a partner like Conga and you distribute your product, it gets
Hmm.
installed in orgs. I think there is a dashboard or a control center that lets you kind of go to an account, see if they've turned on level one, two, or three of the product, or they've licensed
There
that
is,
product.
correct.
How many
It's
And
licenses?
under second level passage packaging if you want those kind of
Okay.
levels. Absolutely. And it also provides like black tab features, much like Salesforce has. So the customer can give me login access to their org and I navigate to it within my partner development or excuse me, my partner management org. And then I can actually log in and give them really good service behind the scenes.
And depending on how you set up your license, whether in a PBO org or your main production org, it's the LMA app. And then there's also
Hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Environment Hub. But under LMA, that's where you can see the licensing and then all the feature parameters. So if you want to do feature toggling and all that,
Hmm.
I've had a ball setting that stuff up. So
Yeah, well, and many
Wow.
people here, as we talk about a couple more topics on tech debt, sometimes these product companies they go out of business. And so it can be a struggle because then that license, for example, if they didn't change the license date to Evergreen, your access to that product disappears and you have no recourse. So you can reach out to Salesforce support, and I have heard of examples of where they'll help navigate that and help you, get your data exported and such. So if you're dealing with that issue, there is some hope for that. The second thing I wanted to highlight is we've recently become a partner with a company called Hubble, Hubbl. And going back to your example, Eric, where you highlighted earlier that, look, I have a metrics dashboard that kind of tells me what's the velocity of what's going on in Salesforce. So at least I can validate that whatever you're experiencing, if there's latency or otherwise, I can see, is it in Salesforce or is it not in Salesforce? So that at least, cuts my root cause analysis time in half because I
Yeah.
know where to start looking.
Yeah.
And one of the lesser known capabilities when people think about how can I actually validate, if I'm going to invest in technical debt remediation, because sometimes it's not really clear. Like it just feels like someone's taking out the trash and you're like, well, how much do I want to pay for someone to take out the trash? It doesn't feel like I'm getting a lot of value. Well, they have what's called a process analyzer tool that will actually go in and let's just imagine on the sales cycle, right? So let's say you have 7 steps in your sales process as defined in your opportunities. And you can identify, hey, let's look at the first 2 quarters of the year. That product will actually go through and look at your metadata and kind of understand the whole process. And it'll look at your data, including that little known, a related list down there that tells you which stage you switched to and switched back to and what were the dates. It'll leverage all of that data to give you a picture of like, okay, right, your average sales cycle is X, right? Your biggest roadblock is this stage. Your biggest repeated stage, meaning where salesperson will roll it back when you're
Mhm.
reverting to sales process, is this stage. And it provides a baseline data to say, okay, great. If you're going to do some optimization, if you're going to do some tech debt remediation, you can run the exact same process analyzer again once you've done all of your updates. And it'll give you a quantitative score to say, look, you've improved here by 26%. You no longer revert back to this stage anymore. And I just thought that was so brilliant. It seems kind of pedantic to people, but it's well beyond taking out the trash. It's a real quantitative way where you can get a legitimate score of how you're improving, and anything that uses a standard pick list as a process or
Mhm.
path can be
Mhm.
part of that. And there's many other examples
Mhm.
too, but I just thought this is so brilliant. We're trying to let more people know that this exists because, of course, we want to provide quantifiable evidence that things are going better, productivity is rising, and when you're implementing AI, think about bringing in that chatbot or that product information internal facing AI bot to help people. You can actually
Yeah.
quantify whether or not that AI is really helping us move forward or is just like the study that came out 2 weeks ago, where if you asked an open source developer working on a mature project, how is AI your AI co-pilot helping you, they'd say it's making me faster, but the data showed it actually made him 19% slower because it feels awesome and there's a dopamine hit when I keep using this little tool, but it actually made them slower. So it's a quantifiable way to prove out your value, which I thought was really good.
I ran into them. So they're founded by ex-Salesforce people anyway, I saw they came over to me like a year and a half ago and said, I want to show you this new thing we're working on. And I am a fan of tech debt remediation, event monitoring, performance analysis of an org, like all
Hmm.
these things that it's not like there's no revenue for Salesforce. Once you buy event monitoring, like nobody's going to call you again to make sure you're getting the most out of it. But I would love meeting with customers, and I'm like, show me how you're using it. Are you doing this?
Hmm.
Or yes. Have you asked yourself this? It looks like you're doing this. And they're like, no, I didn't know you could do that. And Hubble, HUBBL.com. And
Yep.
by the way, this is not, I didn't know John was going to talk about this today. We're both fans. Um, Hubble, you install it in your org, you connect it to your org.
Hmm.
It runs for like a day. I don't know how long it runs. Depends on the complexity of your org, but it scans so many things, metadata, event monitoring, I think, your data, looking for audit trail history data, like we just talked about. And then it creates like most people can't justify the time to spend on remediating tech debt. But like John said, this is quantifiable. There's dashboards that say, what's the cost of doing nothing? Well, on this trajectory, it's likely that your deployments are going to come an hour to 2 hours longer in 3 years, given your current deployment
Hmm.
and the amount of
Hmm.
test losses you have and stuff like that. That's just one made up example. It's probably not a real one, but they give you ROI and quantifiable numbers
Hmm.
around what the impact of doing something would be or what the impact of not doing something is. And that's something that only an experienced architect, Salesforce architect would be able to put together for you unless you buy it off the shelf with these guys. And then it's like turning on a dashboard. It's like event
Hmm.
monitoring does its own thing, but event monitoring, you have to know what questions to ask it. These
Hmm.
guys, they're asking the right questions to start with.
Yep.
Um, so super cool.
Well, I will just offer. I think I want anybody. I mean, even an architect who knows this information, the amount of like the scale and horizon of things that they uncover would take an architect a long time to compile, even if they
Yeah,
know everything and how to do it. And
yep.
so I would suggest anybody on this call, right? You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. It's forward John Klein. You know how to get a hold of me, but anybody who wants one of those reports, I'm happy to give them to you for free because I'm able to do that. And it's just a quick email. You give permission for it to access your org, and then you get the report. And I want to make sure people have that. So if that's something that interests you, please let me know through my SI. We can help you get access to that report so you can get on the evaluation train as it relates to tech debt, so it doesn't block you like it's happened with many other mature orgs. So
So
guys, we're
awkward
coming up.
question for
Keep
you.
going. Yes.
So sounds cool, but let's say that I have governance at my company, and I'm not allowed to install any old AppExchange product into my production org to
It
do this.
doesn't actually require anything to be installed. The process analyzer does because it has to have access to the data
Okay.
and to the, kind of the internal metadata and data and to compile it all. But the actual product that does the initial report doesn't require any installation. It just
Huh.
requires you to do a nice OAuth access into the org, and then you can go and delete the connected app when you're done.
So you have to create a connected app, or there
You
has
don't
to
have
be.
to do it. Everything's automatic.
Really?
Yep.
Because
Maybe.
because they probably already have a org that's the connect. They already probably have a connected app that they're
Yep.
using for auth, so that's how they're able to just connect to your org.
Yep.
Hmm. I
It's
don't know how
super
it works.
simple.
Because the
Amazing.
connected
Okay,
app is
great.
just the identity provider,
Yep.
essentially. So
Exactly. So they
Okay.
probably have a hub and spoke model of some kind. But
That's
good. So as we finish here, I always like to finish with inspiration. So I want to know what inspires you lately. What has got you fired up and excited?
well, there's a recency bias here because I actually never heard of this Hubble before, and I just started. I was half listening, but I was actually double checking everything that was on the site.
That's good,
This
Mike.
actually looks pretty
You
cool.
can fact check me anytime.
Not fact checking. No, I
No,
was just
I know. I'm
really
just
curious.
playing.
Genuine curiosity.
Yes, I love it.
This looks like something that would get bought, just like own backup type of stuff. But again, who am I to say? So I'm
Yeah,
Pretty
very
amazing
Trevor
curious.
product.
recommended that we buy as a company. We don't, so I'm just gonna go. Yeah, I hope that works out.
Hope that works out.
What else? What else, Mike? What are you excited about?
Okay, so then another bias is all the stuff Cursor's doing. I don't know if you saw recently, they have now the web app. So like you can use like ChatGPT, you can use Cursor's agent from the web.
Hmm.
And this is following the fact that now their background agent you can use from Slack. So like if you have an open PR or a branch of your product that's out there, someone from product could just Slack about their experience and then the bot could go and fix it and they could go return to that app. I'm sure I haven't seen it done yet with Salesforce, but I'm sure someone that's smart enough that could set up Scratch orgs could have GitHub's cursor bot, right? Just from Slack, just making changes and doing things like that. Maybe that's a fun POC that I should demo or try
Check
out.
it out. Try it out.
I think you should. I'd be interesting to see what tasks are like good candidates for that, right? And which ones are not. And I think that's really, as I see it, that is the headwinds. I mean, there's two headwinds I see for AI right now. One is like the curating process, understanding what to use when and where. And the second is how to solve AI security as it relates to data access. I actually think that's another element when you go through the process of doing your innovator cert with Trailhead, you see the level of granularity that you extend because you essentially extend a full user to an AI agent, which I thought was
For public
brilliant.
agent, yeah,
It's for a public agent, and it's well beyond what a typical guest user.
you can control it. Yeah, but yeah,
Yeah, it's much. I found it to be much more robust than I saw with like the basic guest user setup, and so I just thought that was great because it's already familiar to everybody, right? Because we're managing users this way, so we're just managing a digital labor user in the same
Mm.
way, which is good. So I'll say what's inspiring to me is I had another fellow architect in the Salesforce space do a little marketing analysis. So call out to you, Lily, if you're listening. But I really appreciate all your work. And one of the things she highlighted was that there's really she analyzed an uptrend in both soft skills and AI soft skills as being something that is really growing on the inquiry side that people are really trying to learn more about, which is very exciting to me because that's certainly an area I want to focus on and have continued to with People First Method. And I want people to, AI is moving into the basement. And so we need to learn how to move up to the higher floors of our roles. And I just think that makes working with people makes our, the teams that we work with so much more enjoyable and engaging as people begin to flourish and, kind of imbue more of who they're designed to be. So I'm excited to see that there's kind of maybe a coalescing and I hope I can, meet the demand.
That's wonderful, John.
Yeah. I'm trying to think about what I'm excited about and stay on topic. On topic, problem that I saw that existed last November with public agents was there was no out-of-the-box multi-factor authentication for public agents. So, when you call American Express or your credit card company and they say, what's your
Yeah, the
birthday?
KYC.
Yeah, the KYC. So they're validating you are who you say you are because you know something that's in their database. And it's the same as asking a password. Of the three addresses here, which one did you live at previously? So KYC, know your customer, making sure the person is who they say they are before they go update your email address because you asked them to. So that didn't exist out of the box and you had to roll your own. Last night, I found out what some of the badges were for Legend, so I got a head start on them. One
Oh,
of them,
cheater.
Ooh, look at
one of
this.
them
Spoiler
is
alert. Spoiler alert.
there's a bunch that aren't published yet, but there's some ones that are can be part of a. I think they're part of a Flow for Agents super badge, and one of them is it's actually out there already. I think add multi-factor authentication to your agent. So I did that one, and I was delighted to see that I know at least email is supported as a channel. It'll email you a code. And then if you put that code back into the agent, it'll authenticate you as somebody who's
Hmm.
allowed to go forward and modify a record or enter an order on your behalf or something like that. And it wasn't there. I was like, guys, this is great and all, but have you tried yet to impersonate another contact in the system and ask it the same question and tell it that your contact has changed? It'll accept it. That's the way it was back in November. And you really had to be aware as an implementer,
Hmm.
as a customer, that this should be done first. And at the time, I think we only had Copilot. It was internal facing. I think Agentforce for public was in, I don't know where it was in its release cycle. Anyways, to make the story short, multi-factor authentication isn't Trailhead badge for agents is a Trailhead badge. You can go figure it out, and they're out of the box actions. You don't have to go figure it
Nice.
out. It'll go test it, and that works. So I guess that's what I'm excited about for now is like it's coming together and it's working. And last week, one of my TAs got invited to a customer, and they went in to help the customer make 2 agents. They knew what use cases they wanted to make. And when they showed up, somebody went off script and said, "What do you guys want to do? Do you want to do this or do you want to do something else? Let's think of some new ideas." And so all the prep that my team had done to get ready to help this customer with their agents, the problem went from known to unknown. And it's like, okay, well, let's see what happens. So they split the customers' attendees in person, it was a group thing, into 2 groups. And over 2 hours, there were 7 new agent ideas that they came up with. And one was an SDR agent, and one was an account research agent. Like, tell me what's new about this account. And the TA and the SE were like, okay, well, let's see what we can do. In 2 hours, the 2 groups of customers were able to create 4 agents each. One of them was overlapping. They had 7 use cases. And my TA came back and was like, I'm actually super confident to now go into any meeting and just say, like, what do you want to build? And that gives me shivers because there's been some talk over the months about agent force reliability, or it's taking a while for my agent to come up, or I have to refresh the screen before it does something. And I guess I'm excited about it working as designed and that being what it's supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I shouldn't say that, but it's been a really bleeding edge year for 2 years for both Data Cloud and Agent Force, and I'm feeling good. So
Well, that's good. I think the ecosystem at large is grateful for that.
yeah,
That and Eric, that is exciting. That is news that you should share with everyone. I know maybe it sounds bad, but at the same time, it's refreshing to
Hmm.
hear because all of us who have been working with Agent Force have been working with Agent Force. So
yeah. No, it's true. I
Yeah.
mean, it's been mostly good as a product, and it's getting better. And the thing is, there are some things we did really right, like multiple topics per agent were in there, not from the beginning. Copilot only had 1, but Agent Force already had like 10 or 11
Hmm.
max. And those were great things that were super great from the beginning. And then what's just getting better is just speed is getting better. That's a huge emphasis on what we're working on to tune. What do we do to make the response time of agents down to, like, I don't know, I'm not going to say a number because I've heard good numbers, but better.
Hmm.
Uh, so, I like Salesforce products. They get announced, and about 2 years later, they're complete.
They're amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lightning took 3 years, 4 years, something like that. It takes a while when you do 3 releases a year to get them all out. And Agent Force is releasing like not 3 releases a year. It's coming out faster.
Hmm.
well, and it
Well,
took what
good.
like 8 years to get the dynamic lightning pages, right, with all the custom fields. And it's like,
It took a
oh,
long
now I don't need
time.
LWC.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
that
For
there was
for certain
probably a
things, for certain things.
For
prioritization
non-custom
problem on that
objects,
one.
for standard objects, because they had to modify the Java classes on each individual object. Yeah, that's good. Well, gentlemen, it is always a pleasure. And to our listeners, thank you for listening into our conversation. You can always reach out if there's a topic you'd like for us to cover. But it's a pleasure, gentlemen, and looking forward to next time.
Cool. Good talking to you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Salesforce Trails and Trials. If you found this episode valuable, we would love your help reaching others. Please subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, and share this with another who would benefit.